Thanks for tuning in to 101.3 BKMG The Farce, coming to you live from separate places, pre-recorded. Now presenting The Bane and Mickey Show. Welcome to the podcast, everyone. This is our sixth episode. I think, if I'm counting right.
666.
Pretty close. Lots of sixes. But today we're super lucky to have very special guest, Melissa Johnson, with us.
Hello, Melissa. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello. Well, I mean, very special already pretty much captures it, right?
Right.
I used to teach you.
You did. You're the reason.
I used to try to teach you.
You're the reason we can do this podcast, because we would know nothing at all.
That's true.
I wouldn't even know what a movie was, I think.
I always thought they were just the movers, the talkies.
The talkies. We brought Gavin into the 20th century.
We did.
Thank
we
you.
did.
I appreciate that.
We settled for 20th.
Mm-hmm. I'm not quite ready for 21st yet, but we'll start on 20th.
We're starting
and we'll work our way
slow.
up.
It's a slow
we gotta just take it slow.
transition.
We had 2 years to learn, and he managed to make it to the last century.
I sure did.
Indeed. Well, yeah, today we have Melissa here. She was a professor while Gavin and I were both attending university, and taught us a lot of stuff.
And we brought her in because we're talking about the classic of classics, Citizen Kane, today.
Citizen Kane, the
And
must-see
since
film.
Melissa's a lot smarter than we are, we wanted to bring her in for her expertise.
I'm much better at faking that than the two of you are. Give it time. You'll get there.
Yeah. Well, before we talk
Eventually.
about Citizen Kane, we usually like to start off asking if you've seen anything good recently.
Like shows, movies.
Yeah, surprisingly, I am I feel like I need to preach the gospel of Borat too.
Ooh.
And I hear myself saying it, and I feel like it feels very fitting for 2020, right? What a strange time to be alive, that I feel like I was just telling somebody yesterday that I feel like it's one of the most important and meaningful things people can and should be watching right now. I had mixed feelings about the first one.
Mm-hmm.
And lots of it was very much my, humor and sort of style of satire, but then plenty of it I just felt sort of obnoxious to me. But I literally just watched it last night and then can't stop talking or thinking about it, and how strangely poignant and timely it is, and really weirdly tender and sweet. So I would recommend it. Maybe not if you have a delicate constitution. There is still some gross stuff, and maybe not as the star suggested it as a family film. Maybe you don't want to bring your whole family to sit down and watch it. But that was really great. I'm trying to think of other stuff that I've watched recently. I've been doing a lot of rewatching things. So revisited Boy recently, Taika Waititi's Boy, and once again, just so beautiful and moving and tragic and redemptive and just delightful film. And revisited Varda's Vagabond, which is also extraordinary. So yeah, I need some recommendations for new stuff. One of my friends said recently, when I said, "Have you watched anything good recently?" They said, "Well, there aren't any new movies, right?" So, which isn't really true. That's not true.
There's Gavin and I already talked about it, but The Devil All the Time on Netflix.
It's on my list. I might have to watch that tonight.
Palm Springs.
I did see Palm Springs, and I loved it.
Mm-hmm.
It was it's so weird. Really, really funny and again, like really kind of poignant and moving, which is all these movies that, even including yesterday when I decided I need to like cheer up. So I'm going to watch Borat because of course that's just going to be a raucous, you know, hilarious ride. And then I'm like tearing up, you know.
Yeah.
Which I kind of felt like that with Palm Springs too. I was like, isn't this supposed to just be a really funny movie with Andy Samberg? And it was, but also, yeah, it had a lot more
It was deep.
depth to it than I expected. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's great.
A lot of movies are gaining a new sort of like relevance, like that. You know, the doing the same thing every day, being stuck in quarantine.
Yeah.
I was watching this show called Counterpart with J.K. Simmons, and part of it came out like 3 years ago, and part of it was this other Earth, and they just like had a big pandemic thing, and there's masks and all these signs and telling people like report people if they're sick, and I was like, that's oddly timely for something that came out in 2017.
Yes.
Yeah. It's a little
Yeah.
who went to the
Yeah.
future.
Crazy. Yeah. It's amazing the things that start to take on different meaning, or just the things that I find myself feeling like I can't really fully enjoy anymore, or at least not right now. You know, hopefully at some point, you know, you'll come back to something, but I think there's also something about being in the midst of a pandemic, and then the larger sort of political social landscape that creates so much existential dread. And then there's a little piece of me that finds it hard to enjoy things that are completely vacuous, like I could have even a couple years ago, you know. So yeah, I mean, I think it's surprising, but then also I think it's almost impossible to avoid seeing sort of deeper meaning when you're experiencing things, even if it's just kind of a nice escape, because our lives are largely isolated and yeah, filled with a lot of uncertainty. So then you watch things that are maybe just sweet and sentimental and charming, and then it takes on a different level of meaning for you when you're in that situation. So
Yeah.
yeah. I was telling somebody that the current all of these stories happening right now, that I was like, if my students were submitting these or were pitching these stories, it would be one of the rare times I'd be like, no, new topic, none of this made
Yeah.
this.
Well,
This is too ridiculous.
Yeah.
Nobody's gonna buy that. Yeah, nobody's gonna believe it.
Yeah. It's great. Yeah.
Oh man, the things that we didn't think were possible 4 years ago.
So young. So
Oh
naive.
boy.
Yeah.
Kendall, have you seen anything good recently?
Last night, was it last night? I think it was last night. I watched The Skeleton Twins, which I hadn't seen before.
What did you think of it?
I really liked it. It was kind of really nostalgic, because it's about two siblings, and I was like, I miss my brother, but it's okay. Yeah, I don't know. It was nice. It's interesting to see Bill Hader and Kristen Wiig in like a dramatic role. I mean, it is is definitely. I mean, they fit it very well because there are comedic moments that like I don't think you could have another actor do some of those things, but
yeah,
it's also like, oh yeah, they can also do sad, dark drama stuff as well. So, but it's a nice balance, I think.
I remember when I watched that, it kind of made me realize like a lot of comedic actors, when they do drama, they do it really well because I feel like they have like a really good feel for their emotions and like how to elicit certain things and make those dramatic moments land as well as the comedic ones, which I think is really cool.
Well, and also, don't they say that like a lot of comedians just are doing comedy to balance out
less
the
sad?
Yeah.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
Sure. If you want to be a downer about
being
it.
able to really tap into the human experience and connect with your audience, right? So I think that I think there's a lot of comedians, and especially those who I think are able to maybe tap into that darker side of humor and that darker side of the humorous aspects of humanity, right? That I think, and I think Bill Hader and Kristen Wiig certainly can do that very
Mm-hmm.
well,
Mm-hmm.
in their comedy and their impressions, you know. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think there's also, yeah, that movie was another one kind of around that wave of independent films where it was kind of promoted like it was again starring these two big comedians, and my expectations when it came out was that it was going to be a lot funnier than it was, and then same sort of thing of feeling like, wow, I really just saw this
It hits you
incredible,
hard.
yeah, this incredibly complex and tragic
Mm-hmm.
story, you know. But again, just that final, the final shot with them
Yeah.
as they're leaving together, and you know, spoiler, I guess, but it's just so moving and really kind of inspiring because it's, you know, of all of the tragic elements that led up to that, it still has this real warmth and heart to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was good. Well, okay, now that we've done that, I think it's time to get into the good old classic, or that's what they tell you. They tell you this film is a
Tell you
classic
this is a classic.
and that you have to see it and that you can't
Mhm.
make films if you haven't seen
If you haven't
if
seen
you haven't seen Citizen Kane.
Citizen Kane, and if you don't love it so much that you want to
Mhm.
watch it every Friday night
Mm-hmm.
with all your
That
buddies.
that you're not a real filmmaker and that you're
You're
lame.
really not. You're really not. Gavin,
Yeah.
yeah, I think I definitely didn't watch this film until we watched it for class.
Hmm.
Um,
For my class.
Me as well.
yeah.
Me as well.
You're welcome.
Not that I regret watching it in class, but I don't think I probably would have not gone out of the
Yeah.
way, but I probably wouldn't have searched it out on my own, I suppose. But
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if I really had expectations for it or anything. Gavin, did you have like expectations or
Um,
like impressions?
so I remember it was kind of built up, and I knew it was always one of those movies like, oh yeah, I'm totally gonna watch it, but I was not. Until we watched it for class, and I was like, all right, here we go. I The first time I watched it, I was expecting a lot better from it,
Hmm.
and I was kind of let down. I think that was because I'm probably not the only person like this, but I was really just focused on like the rosebud thing, and then the reveal was
Yeah.
sort of a letdown. Um, but then I recently watched it again a few months ago, and I sort of like kind of got it
Mm-hmm.
and was able to sort of watch the movie instead of focus on the rosebud thing.
Mm-hmm.
So it was definitely better the second time I watched it because I was able to actually like enjoy the film and appreciate some of the art of it
Yeah.
and the message of it and everything like that.
Yeah. I mean, the Rosebud is so interesting because it kind of functions a little bit at like MacGuffin, but then at the
Mm-hmm.
same time, it is integral and it does get answered. But I mean, I think it kind of masquerades as something a lot more important than it is, um, as a way to maybe like provide some sense of meaning, when really I think what the filmmaker is trying to say is that his life was largely meaningless, you know. And so
Mhm.
it's a really interesting tactic, but it also, yeah, I think it's also kind of makes me think of the old joke of person in class reading Shakespeare for the first time and saying is okay, but it was riddled with cliches, you know, that
Mm-hmm.
the things that, you know, kind of over time, I mean, it's been decades of being considered widely as the greatest American film of all time.
Mm-hmm.
And whether we would contest that or not. And I
Mhm.
think it's okay to, you know, to challenge that perspective. But I think then it becomes so part of the sort of annals of our popular culture that we become maybe desensitized to it because we expect it, we're expecting something more profound. And one of the things like the first time I saw Citizen Kane when I was younger, and I had just enough knowledge to be at least internally a little pretentious of my thinking, right, of like, well, I understand there's high art and I'm supposed to appreciate that, right,
Mm-hmm.
because that's that's what you do if you're, if you're like a really cool, sophisticated
A
person, right?
filmmaker.
A
Right.
film person, right? And I remember watching it and thinking, this is really boring. And why
I
is
would
it?
agree.
Why do people love this so much? And after actually learning more, and watching it later, I actually quite enjoy. I do find a lot of enjoyment out of it, but not in the same way that I would, Die Hard.
Hmm.
Or even even a lot of other less maybe less contentious classics than Die Hard. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's interesting. It's an interesting film because it does have so many expectations, and it's kind of, I think, become something that everybody knows about and not as many people have seen
Hmm.
as know or think they know what it is.
Did you
Well,
have to like change your not like change your like yeah like change your opinion or change your perspective on the film when you started teaching and using it in your lectures?
I mean, in some ways, I think partly what I had to do that was a challenge from the very beginning was meeting people where they're at, as students as well, and recognizing that maybe not everybody was going to love the experience. Do you know what I mean?
Hmm.
Um, that not everybody is going to like films that they maybe appreciate. But I also had the experience going through, going through college and graduate school with film, recognizing that there's different ways to experience a film. So going from feeling like, well, film is purely here to entertain me in one singular way, then recognizing that I could watch things from different perspectives. So
Hmm.
it it was, I mean, in some ways I would say, yeah, I had to change a little bit of my perspective, because you can't say, well, this is one of the most boring films I've ever seen, let's watch it. First film class I taught, I screened 2001 A Space Odyssey,
Yeah.
and that's a film that the first at least 3 times I tried to watch it, I fell asleep during,
It's a lot
which
to.
again, something you're really not
yes.
supposed to admit as a film person, but I did. And I have a tremendous amount of appreciation for it now, and its beauty and its grandeur and its complexity. And there's so many incredible things going on in it,
Yeah.
but it's not one of my favorite movies. And I don't ever think, wow, I really just want to sit down and watch that,
In
right?
its entirety.
And
Let's
in
watch
its
all
entirety, even,
two and a
right? Like, I
half, three
can't wait
hours.
to just immerse myself in the world of 2001 A Space Odyssey. And with Citizen Kane, there are times where I feel like I really want to just really immerse myself in Toland's cinematography, and I really want to think about the fall of this, fall of this character. We could debate the rise of his character as well, but yeah, I mean, the first time I showed it in class, I think was in an intro to film class, and students didn't love it. Maybe one or two were like, "Wow, that was incredible. That totally lived up to the hype. I can't believe that was missing from my life all this time." And then everybody else was like, uh, "That was boring. What do I don't know what to say about it." And then, but to me as a teacher, that's a really great challenge to be able to say, okay, so if we're watching something that's been revered for so long, if we're watching something that kind of uh, collected at least a number of techniques that then became standard practice for storytelling, standard practice for shooting and for editing, and all of these really great things that the film drew together. Um, then how do we talk about those things and appreciate those things if we didn't like it to begin with? And that, for me, was kind of my own journey with the film, was coming to a place of recognizing its incredible contribution and its really impressive form, while also kind of setting aside or working through the fact that it didn't grab me. I wasn't like, yes, I love these characters, and was taken on this really great ride, and I can't wait to pay $12 to see it again next
Yeah.
weekend, you know? So, but yeah, I mean, for me, by the time I started teaching it, I had already kind of gone through that process of recognizing that you could watch films and analyze films and then appreciate those aspects of what it's achieving and what it tried to do or what it actually succeeded in doing without having to like it.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, how many times in class it would be like, let's talk about this and go beyond like or dislike.
Hmm.
But,
Right.
and some
I think
films
you
are
can
easier
appreciate
to
things,
do that.
but not, you don't have to like everything, but you can
Right,
appreciate it.
right.
Yeah.
And some things I think require time to sit with it. And even just like Gavin, you were saying, watching it again and then thinking about you seeing other things. And I think some films just, they necessitate that. They necessitate time and attention and kind of sitting with them and recognizing what made it kind of impressive to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
Um, my my kid, well, Topher has been getting really into Gordon Ramsay, which
Oh.
makes me so happy. But he was watching Hell's Kitchen, or no, not it was Hell's Kitchen, it was Kitchen Nightmares, and
Oh my gosh.
one of the people on there said essentially like that's just his opinion, like when he corrected that this food tastes bad, and the chef in the room said it's a pretty important opinion. And I kept thinking of that in my head, in relation to film in particular, that, when you look at it and say, okay, well, this film makes its way to the top and in many cases, the top spot of so many critics and historian and filmmaker lists, and has continued to be talked about. So either all of these people are missing something, or maybe I can, soften my expectations and come at it from a different place, or even just again coming at it where you're at and saying, okay, how are you gonna wow me, Citizen Kane?
Yeah. And I mean, it's not like you have to like every single piece of it. You can
Mhm.
appreciate little bits and pieces as you see fit, I suppose.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's true.
And
True.
I feel like part of the problem with watching older movies, especially when you're younger, like or seeing newer movies, is they're kind of the opposite. Like older movies are more slow paced, and the way they do things is a lot different. But it's also like where a lot of these new movies are getting their stuff from.
Mm-hmm.
So you
Hmm.
watch it. So you're seeing new movies first. It's kind of like you brought up, Melissa, with the Shakespeare thing.
Yeah.
But like you're seeing it here first, so you assume that's where it originated. So when you see
Right.
it where it originally came from, it seems kind of cliche to you.
But
Yeah.
it's actually
And I
the
feel
opposite.
like,
Like it grew
Mhm.
from
mhm,
the,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Or to look at it and say, oh, well, you watch a film from 2019 and you see this technique or you see this character type or this story, right, being told. And then you see the version, that you see the place where it sort of came to life originally from 1934. And it feels like, well, yeah, that was okay, but they didn't do it as well as this
right,
this recent
It's like,
and
okay.
that is not to imply that Citizen Kane doesn't do it as well as films from 2019. But yeah, I think it can be, especially like you say, when you're young, even not just age wise, but as far as your exposure and
Mm-hmm.
the amount of life you've sort of lived with film, that it can be kind of, it can feel like it's backwards from what it actually is, before
mhm,
you can get to a place um where yeah, you really enjoy it and it feels endearing to you.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, Citizen Kane is one of those films that, I mean, I've used it and shown it in so many classes. I mean, again, as you said, Kendall, partly because there is this sort of unspoken rule that you can't get your film degree and not be exposed to Citizen Kane. There's this handful of films that it's like, well, you can't really call yourself a filmmaker or film scholar without knowing these films. And partly because again, it is revered as one of the greatest films of all time. So then, but it is the one that of all the older films that I've shown in class, it is the one that does tend to have the most potential for people being underwhelmed with it, which is really interesting. But it also tends to be the film that after discussion sees the most shift in perspective as well. So, we could talk about, Baby Doll, and probably students that loathed it to begin with are going to still loathe it by the time they finish talking about it, even if they appreciate its historical significance, right? But Citizen Kane does tend to elicit the most transformation as far as perspectives once you start to dig into it. So
Yeah.
really, it's an interesting thing to talk about. I started my regular rewatching of Brooklyn Nine-Nine, and one of the early episodes where
Oh,
character wants to she likes classic movies, take her to a classic movie,
oh,
and she says, yeah, I don't
Citizen
know, you
Kane.
pick, just as long as it's just not Citizen Kane,
All
pick a
right,
good
I'll pick a
movie.
better movie
Yeah,
than
than
Citizen
Citizen
Kane.
Kane. Exactly. And just the wonderful kind of like finger on the pulse of what it means to study film and appreciate film, that and I think just that conversation that people have been having, maybe not forever, because it's not really been fashionable to say as film scholars or as filmmakers that you have any qualms with something like Citizen Kane, which I think is why that joke always lands so
You would
well
get
for
your
me.
degree taken away from you.
That's right. Retroactively invalidate your degree if you say that Citizen Kane is not a good movie, or
I
that
think
there's better movies.
I think it's the distinction between what you like and what is like well made.
Mm-hmm.
Because me and Kendall were talking about like American Horror Story, the show,
Uh-huh.
and how like I think it's well made. I just don't really care for it.
Yeah.
I think like how Citizen Kane is for some people. Like I appreciate it. It's just not my favorite. But people assume that just because you don't appreciate it or like it means it's
Or
bad.
it's not your
Right.
favorite, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
If it's not your favorite, it's no good.
Right. Yeah, I mean, and you can't. I like to say that I have like at least 100 films in my top 5 favorites. But yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, there is a distinction, and again, I think that comes kind of with experience, with living a film life, right? That you start to recognize that it's one of the things that I love the most about film is there's so many different avenues to it, and there's so many different ways you can experience it, that you can live with it, that um you can sort of look at it in this very sophisticated and analytical way, and you can think about the aesthetic, and you can think about the contributions, and like you said, look at something and say this is really well made, and you can still not care about it and not enjoy it. And on the other hand, you can enjoy something that objectively you could say is not maybe as well made, or has a lot of problems in any variety of aspects of filmmaking or storytelling or anything else, right? Yeah, I think that's the beauty of it, right? That we get to have conversations about Citizen Kane and say both that it's brilliant and it's a classic and it's a must see, and also maybe that we didn't love it.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not committing to not loving Citizen Kane, for the record, but you'll edit
It's an
around it
opinion
later.
you can
The
have.
tagline will be
Melissa hates
Melissa
Citizen Kane.
hates Citizen Kane.
Shocker. Film professor hates
We'll send it to
Citizen
everybody.
Kane.
Show me a better movie than Citizen Kane.
Melissa Johnson says Citizen Kane is a hot pile of garbage.
Breaking news. Breaking news.
Breaking news.
Read all about it, folks.
We'll have the spinning.
A spinning paper. Yeah. Spinning headline.
We'll put it on a pencil and flip it around.
Or error narrator. Yeah. I mean, for a while, the American Film Institute claimed that there was a movie better than Citizen Kane.
What movie did they say?
Yeah, Vertigo. Just a couple of 2-3 years it dropped, and Vertigo shot up like I don't know, 15 or 20 spots up to the number one spot.
Wow.
Is the greatest
Vertigo is really good
American
though.
film
It
of all
is.
time. And Citizen Kane dropped down, and then you know, after it's sort of like their experimentation in college, they came back around to their old steady Citizen Kane and reinstated it.
What is the AFI basing that off of? Is it like popularity or
No, I mean it's their assessment of, you know, of film history,
okay.
and through the, you know, through the institute, through contributions, right? And
Hmm.
they, you know, they tally. I mean, they are voting on it, but it's not like a popular. It's not a popular vote. Uh,
They
but
use their intellect.
their intellect, yeah. Well, and you know, you look at you. You have to look at other factors as well, right? But
Hmm.
um, yeah, I mean, a lot. Every board, every, you know, magazine that releases their top whatever, you know, lists, you know, they're basing it on their particular perspective, on their particular bias, but you know, and that's not intended to be critical, or criticism, I should say. Yeah, I mean, just looking at, yeah, it's, which is really interesting. I mean, this is a tangent, but it's really interesting to look and compare different organizations, different publications, and what they, how they view those lists. And AFI, for all of its strengths, is very obviously, you know, Americentric as far as their tallying of
Hmm.
contributions, even to American cinema. So,
Well,
you
isn't
know,
it the American Film
It's
Institute?
in the
yeah.
name.
So it's in the name. No surprises there, Gavin. But
Well, I just mean like maybe they're only really
well, they
it
are
might be
definitely
slightly on
only
purpose.
focused, obviously, on American film in that context, right? But even within the context of American film, it's sort of very, yeah, it's still a very limited scope of that, right?
Hmm.
But I think that's, again, that's to be expected, and hopefully, as you know, thoughtful, critical viewers and thinkers, we're looking, you know, we're looking to see what do other people have to say about stuff too, and how can that shape my understanding and appreciation of things,
Hmm.
exposure to other things. Yeah, maybe.
Watched a really cool film from India. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's called Three Idiots.
Mm-hmm.
It's really long, but it's really good.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like saying it's really long is a
But it
little
doesn't
redundant
feel
when you
long.
say it's from India, because that tends to be their MO.
I
Um,
wouldn't know that.
which I
I've only
love.
seen like two of their
Yeah,
movies.
yeah. There's a lot of really great stuff in India. I mean, not just in kind of what we associate in the West as Bollywood film, but
Hmm.
incredibly rich industry there. One of the oldest industries in the world, and incredible stuff that's being produced there. But yeah, I mean, a lot of epics as far as the scale and the scope of the story and the runtime, which is awesome. But yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I mean, so I mean, look at me hijacking your program is in my nature, but I'm just thinking of like, there's, you know, Gavin, you noted the disappointment about the big reveal about Rosebud and its meaning, but what were some of the other things that you felt like maybe changed, or your initial impressions about the film when you first experienced it, or when you experienced it again, or were forced, you know,
Forced, yeah.
Um,
forced to talk about it.
so I mean, like I said, it was mostly like the Rosebud thing 'cause I think I was super focused on that,
Mhm.
just for like the writing portion of it. Um, and they were making a big deal out of it, so it seemed like it should be more important than it was. And I remember when the reveal came, like I understood what it meant and the scope of everything that it was supposed to be like. That was kind of the last time he was actually happy.
Mhm.
Um, but I watched when I watched it again recently, knowing that I was able to like focus on the characters and the story and who was telling them, why they were telling them, and
Mhm.
like how it just sort of went into the overall picture with everything else. So I definitely appreciated it more now,
Mhm.
and thinking about it now, I appreciate more of it. I still wouldn't say it's one of my favorites, but like if someone said they wanted to watch it, I would probably not say no.
Yeah, yeah,
Probably.
yeah.
Yeah.
What about you, Kendall? What were
Yeah.
your? Have you seen it only one time?
No, I watched it again recently. Uh, and yeah, I mean, the first time it was like, I think I appreciated, a lot of the cinematography, especially for the age that it came from. It was fairly advanced for its technical aspects, and considering, how young Orson Welles was, and I think that's something that everyone also hypes up, is like, oh, you gotta be young and successful. Look at Citizen Kane and Orson Welles. And
Yeah. Why haven't you made your Citizen Kane?
I don't know yet,
The
honestly.
answer is you have. It's this podcast.
Oh
This
God.
this episode is the thing.
Well,
But
I did, but then Caldwell said you can't make a movie about a pen. So
yeah, but I think, you're like, you can appreciate it for the talent behind it, but then of course also coming from a modern age, you're like, okay, but I've seen better films because we're at a more developed age, and this is the basis, and this is like a historical artifact that
Mm,
inspired everything else. But I think also in context of like when we first watched it, probably what I mean, we had to go in the evening to watch films and sit in these uncomfortable seats in a
Not to
theater
clean
that wasn't the best quality, and we probably, none of us want to be there. We just want to go home and
Yeah,
not do homework,
yeah.
so it's also like, not, I think being in a dumb adolescent young adult mood also kind of
rebellion.
Yeah.
kind of puts
Yeah.
This
puts you
is
in
all
that
news to me,
spot.
Kendall. I had no idea you can enjoy sitting in those crabby
You
classrooms in those
know,
old wooden
I
desks to
know,
watch.
especially when they were redoing those windows.
Oh my God. When I almost killed people for, yeah, trying to
But
play.
yeah, I think
It's all worth it for film, man.
yeah, yeah, you
Yeah,
just gotta,
you can't have a two
what
by
would
four
you
dropped on
do?
you by your professor. Are you really suffering for your art? No.
I've had worse things dropped on me by other people.
That's fair. Yeah, I think, but coming back to it, and I mean, even just, I think anytime you see a movie a second time, you kind of
Mhm.
are opened up a little more to it. Maybe because you can focus more on analyzing it in a way, rather than,
Right.
or like, you've already experienced it, so now you can kind of look deeper into it. But I mean, it's not my favorite movie. I appreciate parts of it. I think especially the cinematography. I think the story kind of loses me because it's just so long, and it's
Hmm.
all over the place, because you're like, oh, okay, we're gonna follow a politician. Oh, wait, no, we're not.
Hmm.
We
Hmm.
is he? I don't know what's happening,
Yeah.
but so
Yeah.
it's kind of, you know, but
Yeah, because that technique of taking all of these different perspectives, which again, I mean, it's really interesting because, and like for me, these are things that I definitely didn't think about the first probably two or three times that I watched the film. But like even Gavin, when you're saying like how you realize, oh, well, then it's representing this time, the last time he was happy. And to now, like initially that was my interpretation of it. And now I find this like added level of melancholy in that,
mm-hmm,
because it's very ironic that this thing that he's been, you know, metaphorically and by the end literally clinging to, right, that this thing he's been trying to replace was actually not that great to begin with. You know, like there's no
Hmm.
way that kid, like there's no way that that home and that environment was happy for him, but
mm-hmm,
that was like a joyful childhood with his absentee alcoholic, possibly abusive father, and his mother who was so ready to sign him off to somebody else for some money, right?
mm-hmm,
So there's this like I feel like there, at every turn there's these really interesting kind of poignant moments that I mean, and the whole thing kind of being so, this intention to be story about somebody else, right? A real life person. And I think there's so many opportunities to kind of poke at that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And to say, again, to say kind of like your life is nothing, right? Like look at what disappointment. You're gonna die sad and alone, and you're gonna cling to this nostalgic, inaccurate vision of what you lost,
Mm-hmm.
and that's one of the most interesting things for me thinking about the film and talking about the film is like, I think initially, and again for a lot of students, initially they'll say a couple of things. One of my favorite things is when they say like, I really loved all the actors that played him, and then telling them it's the same actor. So that feels like that's awesome that still works, decades later. But
Mm-hmm.
also that they'll kind of summarize it as this, and I think for most of us, even critics and historians, look at the film as the story of the rise and fall, right? Power corrupting. And then asking the question of whether or not, like, again, was the baseline, right? Was the normal world actually that great to begin with, right? Was he really a heroic character? Was he a noble figure to begin with that was then corrupted by absolute power? Was he an innocent child living a joyful life before before the world kind of conspired to jade him? So I think that's kind of one of the most, to me, one of the most enduring aspects of the film is thinking about how it it really feels like before Seinfeld was making it funny, this story about nothing, right? The
Hmm.
kind of absence of meaning and purpose, and maybe calling and everything else that you would want to think that noble characters have, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that the tragedy of it for me is that you kind of look back on it and go, oh God, like, I don't know, maybe he always was a little bit conniving. Maybe he always was seeking out that absolute power,
Mm-hmm.
right? Maybe maybe that scene that's so kind of inspiring, and I think is the point in which we're supposed to see the comparison between him and his partner, right? And they write their rules, right, of like how they're gonna hold themselves and their newspaper accountable, how they're gonna be
Hmm.
different than all these other old guys that have destroyed truth um and have no integrity, right? And that is, I think, intended for us to be comparing that to what happens later, to say,
Mm-hmm.
wow, look at what happens when you don't guard that. But then if you start to poke at that and poke at that and poke at that more, it's like every time you peel something more back, it reveals, I think, even less of who he is as a character, right? That he maybe was he maybe just was destined to be that same kind of person anyway, maybe just with less money, maybe with a smaller house,
Mm-hmm.
but still potentially he would still have been that same person who didn't really have any kind of depth of character and integrity or humanity. And then to have it told by first the news, right? The
Hmm.
sensationalism of the news reel at the beginning, and then all of the other characters just from their perspective, puts the whole thing at question, right? There's not one single reliable narrator in the entire film.
Yeah.
And even the like attempt to make it feel as though it's real life with the newsreels is ultimately undermined, because we're being told the whole film that the news world, right, the media, is untrustworthy, and they're just as conniving and out for a story, and are going to manipulate the facts to begin with. So who do we trust as far as um, who these people are or were? And I think there's something really biting and kind of um, yeah, maybe nihilistic about it, and to me, I think that's probably the thing that I didn't recognize at first, was what didn't work for me, that didn't endear me to it, right? Because it doesn't have a lot of heart, and it kind of masquerades itself as though it starts with heart, and then that's kind of slowly degraded and destroyed. But I don't think it actually has it ever to begin with. And I think that creates a real coldness that doesn't necessarily resonate with audiences.
Mm-hmm.
Feel like, yeah, I really want to invest in these characters because of the depth to any one of them.
Mm-hmm.
Because we don't really ever get to, and like you said, Gavin, it's long, right? The story is long, not just in its runtime, which isn't, extremely long, but just as far as the narrative line, right? The storyline goes from childhood to, you know,
Death.
senior, deathbed. So how do you connect us to those characters through that and the entirety of that time? That's always a bit of a trick. But I think in some ways it's probably intentional to leave that kind of vacuous and cold, which is modeled in the cinematography and the set design, the composition. I mean, I the what thing that does work for me every single time I watch it, those shots when he's old and his young bride is lonely and isolated, and she's sitting in this absurdly large fireplace doing a puzzle, and the sound in those scenes, the cavernous way it's shot and lit, and the sound design that just is like, oh, your whole existence is empty.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Hmm.
cold. It's this giant stone cavern that's not filled with anything
Yeah.
important.
Yeah.
So, but again, I think that it's okay for the film to exist as this cold kind of relic of history that is really brilliant and also maybe not tremendously appealing or endearing to people.
Well, also, how many people, people always want that like happy ending, Hollywood ending sort of
Yeah.
thing. So being approached with something that's bleak and like truthful in a way, because it's like I
Hmm.
think when I was watching it this time around, I was hit by like kind of the irony of the ending. Like these historians or these, your narrators are spending all this time analyzing his life and being like, we need to figure out what is this important rosebud
Hmm.
item, and they have to make an idol out of someone, out of something, and then at the end they really don't care, and
Yeah.
it's sort of that like the perspective of your life compared to your life in someone else's perspective. Like you can't
Yeah.
really analyze someone else's life unless they tell you
Hmm.
what it is, and so it's yeah, I think just in the ending when they're it just shows how much they don't really care because they're just
Yes,
like
I mean,
just
literally,
throw it
his
away.
most
No, yeah,
prized possession, his final gasp for life, is thrown into the fire
mm-hmm.
where nobody notices.
Yeah, yeah,
Hmm.
In this, and then that amazing crane shot that comes up, and you just see the more and more vastness of all of the things he's
all this
bought and
stuff.
filled the space with. But yet, the one thing that even if we buy into it being really important and a symbol of happiness and joy and innocence, is literally thrown
Into
on the
Straight
fire,
in the
yeah,
fire.
like
into the fire.
literally just burned up, and in such an anticlimactic way, right? Because
Right.
like you say, you feel as though you're building to understanding, you're building to a reveal, and the filmmakers don't really give us that. I mean, they do, but they give it to us sort of like it's an off-screen, like some off-screen, extra that doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
And they say, oh, here you go, here's your answer. And then the fact that we can hear all of these news people basically just sort of laughing and like, okay, well, I guess that's that, let's go get drinks. I mean, not
Right.
obviously that's not a completely detailed, accurate retelling of those final scenes, but yeah, I mean, it's just
It's
like, oh,
not.
we invested all of this time. He went all over the country or all over the state looking for these answers, interviewing people and getting them to delve into their memories in meaningful ways, and ultimately it was all meaningless.
Yeah. It's
And
like
I
a
think
big
that's
existential crisis.
it is. It totally is. It's like,
It's like,
oh,
okay, Orson Welles, we get it. You were having your quarter life crisis.
we get it. You thought you were like, you thought you were this like hardened, yeah, figure you're in your early 20s. Yeah,
Yeah.
no. So I think that is the thing that, and I think you really are onto something too, Kendall, that is kind of a big middle finger to the studio system at the time. And the film comes out in 1941. Wells has unprecedented control over the story, unprecedented control over how it would be marketed and what would be known of it and how it was going to be shot. And it really, I think, became and was an outlier as far as what was being done at the time. I mean, there are obviously things that were still, we're still following the regulations at the time, and it met all of the code standards, all of the production code standards. But as far as the expectation and this kind of implicit agreement with the production code, with Hollywood, and with audiences at the time, really was that, and in to some degree explicitly, right? If he broke the law, if he did unlawful things, his philandering, but the way they get around that is that he dies at the end, and he dies alone, and that is the vindication, right? That's the justice in the film as far as the happy ending goes, because he pays an ultimate price for all the ways in which he kind of broke this moral contract with America, right?
Yeah.
And with Hollywood and with the studio audiences. But it doesn't go as far as many or even really most films at the time, which is to say, but let's redeem it even further, right? Redeem it even further and give his life some sort of meaning, right? Maybe even show that the other people in his life are better off without him. But we don't get any of that. They're all, to some extent, embittered and still carrying the resentment and the pain of being connected to him and the damage he did to them. So, it's, and I think, again, in some ways, it's just an extension of that retribution to him, that if he has to be punished for those things, certainly his wife, who started as his mistress, is going to be punished by it. Especially since they divorced, So there's all of these little hidden coded sort of messages as far as the morality. But I think, again, that's one of the biggest ways that the film kind of turns its nose on those, on that contract, on that expectation, is to say, we're not going to redeem it and give it any deeper meaning. We're just going to say, here he is, sad and alone. Everybody else is sad and alone. And the lone sort of voice of reason, sort of the one character who's trying to at least seek the truth, is also ultimately just going to be like, cool, I spent 2 hours thinking this was important, and now I'm over it. Which again is sort of like, from a writing perspective, you'd be like, okay, well, do you really want to just undercut your entire, like, what you spent all this time trying to convince us this was about, and now you're just going to say it's about something else? But I think that it is intended to make us realize, sort of like the end of Sixth Sense, right? Where we realize, oh, wait a minute, all those pieces were there to begin with. We just weren't seeing them from the right perspective. And I think them at the end, when we go, wait, that's it? Why did you do all this build up and try to pretend like it was going to be something else? We realize, oh, wait, it was all building up to this nothingness. It was all meant to tell us that these people these are not good people, right? These aren't good people. This isn't a good world. This is damaging to everybody that comes into contact with it, even inadvertently the people that are, again, kind of in their own way vacuous, to say, cool, I guess his life was meaningless, let's move on.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's a pretty cold message and final sort of punctuation on this project that was, in its own right, incredibly daring and innovative at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's probably a good spot to let it hang.
I don't think we can do any better than that.
Yeah.
However, before we leave, we like to do a random topic from a box that Kendall has kept for a long time.
Yes.
I think the colors are what, blue, pink, and yellow.
Yes. So these are random topics that mostly Jack, Tina, and Pedro wrote down like 2 years ago, but so we don't know what any of them are.
I know.
Would you like to pick a color?
Yeah,
I have to pick a color between, I'm sorry, say that again, yellow.
Yellow, pink, and blue.
Oh, well, yellow. It better be good.
I know.
It says more yellow.
That's the topic.
Next.
Yeah, what does it bring?
Well, I do have a tremendous amount of yellow in my house.
More. You need more.
I need more. I did just recently get another yellow pillow, and my children said, "Mom, do you really need more yellow pillows?" To which I responded, "Yes."
More yellow.
Yes.
I put lights up in my living room.
Cowbell, you can never have too much. So
right, more.
I put lights in my living room to make the whole thing look yellow now when I turn them on.
Really?
Ooh.
Not like yellow, but like they have a yellow light.
Yes.
Sort of because they're like Christmas lights.
Okay.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I don't have, and maybe you don't know, because I'm trying to think if either of you were in my house before, but
Nope.
I'm maybe still once.
just over 2 months here, and I feel like I hit the point to which it was like manageable for most day-to-day things, so then it just like halts.
Yep, I got to that point.
I used to have Christmas lights up in like white ones up in my living room, and these really awesome red bulbs, like oversized red bulbs in the other side in like the library dining area, and it was awesome as far as like the atmosphere that it would create. And I don't have any of it back up in here now. So, and one of my favorite things before were the lights that were up around the like my liquor cabinet and all the shelves with all the glassware, and so then it just was like this really cool, just glance over and it's
the party spot.
That was so cool and inviting.
Maybe we should have come over. We could have a small party.
Yeah. Now I just have to settle for the yellow pillows.
Yeah. Well, should we do another one, since that one was a little...
It was underwhelming.
A little odd.
It was underwhelming. Do you still want yellow? I think you have to, because it said more yellow, right?
It said more
yellow. It did say more yellow.
I'm a slave to the cards.
Or sticky papers, I guess, in this case.
I like how I'm like looking at it like I'm gonna get a glimpse or something. Okay. There.
Do you believe in aliens? There's your glimpse.
Yes.
Am I supposed to answer, or is Gavin supposed to answer?
Everybody.
General,
it's a whole general random topic. Do you believe in aliens? Yes.
I don't know. I'm such a cynic. But I was just having this conversation with somebody about belief, and how I'm like, I don't know, there's so many things that I feel like you can't explain that makes me feel at least open to the possibility that there are things in the world that are not just pure logic and reason, and you know what I mean? So in that regard, I would say I'm open to the possibility that there are aliens, but I don't actively like.
You don't seek out aliens on your free time?
No. I know it's shocking.
Me either.
I know I scream alien hunter. Yeah, I think that we're so egotistical though to think that we're it, right? We're like the peak of
ape predator.
Yeah.
Or apex predator.
So we're the top. We're the top of everything. And then to think that there couldn't possibly be, but I mean, there's so many things discovered in the universe and the vastness therein that, I mean, who knows what could be out there.
And even more past what we're able to discover.
Yeah.
Yeah,
100%. Right. And that and sometimes I do think it's kind of interesting to think about what if while we're attempting from our vantage point to study the universe,
they're studying
us at the
us,
center of it, and what if other places or other parts of the universe that are doing the same thing, right? That are looking at us and saying, Wow.
I kind of prescribe to the theory that aliens came, saw us, and left. So they were like, no thanks.
Right. They were like, oh, fuck no. I'm getting out of here.
Although I was thinking about that the other day of again, I think it comes back to that kind of Eurocentric or Americentric arrogance, right? Of like things we can't explain from past civilizations. We think, oh, well, clearly it had to be aliens, right? Had to be an extraterrestrial life. These beings that are so much further advanced, because the alternative is acknowledging that ancient Egyptians maybe could do things that we couldn't do, or that ancient Mayans could do something we couldn't do, you know?
Right.
So in that way, I'm very firmly like, maybe we're not the like premium, you know, maybe we're not like playing at like the top.
Right.
Top tier of civilization.
Well, like,
you know?
I agree with Gavin though, you know, like maybe the aliens were helping out the Mayans and then they realized the humans were just shit and they're like, we tried, can't help you, adios.
I don't know. I mean, we tried to share our technology.
See you later.
And then
you just didn't get it.
And
we're gonna go find someone else.
You just made buildings. What the hell?
Yeah.
Yeah. If there are aliens, I wouldn't say no to a good abduction, because
we'll let you know, if they hit us up, we'll say, hey, we got Melissa's consent.
Place is maybe I can like choose, like bring some people with me. That would be great. But yeah.
Right. Well,
they want to come back and help us out again.
Right. Or something.
See what they can do with this mess.
I mean, I wouldn't turn down an Independence Day White House explosion right now.
Gavin.
I said I wouldn't turn it down. I'm not asking for it, but if they were like
actively advocating for aliens to attack the White House, I'm just saying.
Any White House would do, probably.
There's a White House. It's painted white shingle, down the street. It's fine.
My house is
all the White Houses.
They can't tell the difference.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for putting up with us and coming on and sharing your time to
my pleasure.
Give some thoughts.
Hopefully,
will be one of our more intellectual episodes.
I was gonna say, hopefully, I could come across as being really elitist and pretentious.
I mean, you just probably come across smarter than us, which is not hard because, like I said, we set the bar pretty low.
Listen, never. Never. Only when I have to, because I'm being paid for it.
Oh, yeah, unfortunately not this time.
Did we send that check?
You didn't.
Shoot.
Oh, it's fine. We're all on the same level.
It's in the mail, and you're
I'm losing you.